ICQ Podcast, episode 344, Joy of VHF and Above. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, our 344th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast. Supported this episode by Terry Perry and our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin, M1MRB, is joined by Chris, Mike Zero, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike Zero, Sierra Golf Lima, Ed, DD5, Lima Papa, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin, M6BRY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a discussion about the joy of VHF and above with Tim Kirby, Golf Whiskey 4, Victor X-Ray Echo, and we finish up with your listener feedback. Well, as always, it's your very kind donations to the ICQ podcast that, helps us pay our way and keeps this show advert-free for you. And along with our monthly and annual subscription donors this episode, we'd like to thank Terry Perry, who's currently studying for his technician license in the States. And we hope to hear from you soon, Terry, about your call sign when you successfully complete, your training and get on the air and come join us, on the bands. So, Terry, look forward to receiving a mail from you soon, hopefully with that wonderful news. You can make a donation, to help running costs and show your value you find in the show. And it's very simple. All you need to do is go to icqpodcast.com/donate. Think of a figure or one of the options we've got there on the page that you can send us. And whatever you see as value for the show that you've received, pop it our way. And it keeps us advert free and keeps us producing the show for you and paying our running costs. Right, well, let's move on now with our show as we join Martin, Chris, Martin, Ed, Frank and Bill to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including French military to jam radio and beware of fake SDRplay devices. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to this episode of the ICQ podcast, which is episode 344. And tonight, the news roundtable for that episode. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH. Hi, Chris.
Good evening, Martin. Good evening, guys. Nice to be here again.
Yeah. We'll we'll do it all again. I've also got Mr. Martin Rothwell, who we've been quite active, you and Chris and I, on the radio recently, haven't we?
Nice to speak to you, Nice. Yes, we've been on the radio quite a lot the last few days. Really enjoying it, actually. Sitting at home, working away, tapping away, and suddenly, your dulcet tones come out of my speakers next to me. Like, do I talk to my customer? Do I talk to Martin? I'll talk to Martin. It's fine.
Yeah. It's good to have you. Also got Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP, who've, the other podcasters have been talking a fair amount on the radio. I've spoken to Ed as well this week.
Yeah, managed to talk to you earlier on the week a couple of times. And apart from that, being just clearing the driveway. It's snowy again here. But it's good to get on and talk to the guys this evening.
Yeah. That's good to have you. Well, also, as I move on the other side of the pond, Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH, is here. Frank, we didn't actually contact on the radio because you've been extremely busy, as I well know. So
I've been working on my dulcet tones.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, you stay there, but stay with them. They're good. And last but not least, and I have worked him on the radio this week as well, is Mr. Bill Barnes, WC3B. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Martin. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for inviting me again.
That's good to have all of you, Bill, and yourself, Bill, and the rest of the team. At least we've got a full house tonight, unlike the last episode where it was just Dan, Edmund, and myself. So that one was a fairly quick one. Okay, first news story, amateur radio on Hackaday. And now, I quite like this when amateur radio gets up on Hackaday, and because it helps promote our hobby. And this time, a lady called Jenny List, K7CKF, was up there talking about her favourite things and how she got into amateur radio. And Jenny is a very clever lady because she's also into software-defined radio and does GNU radio and has done lectures on it. And I know she has because, Chris, you've been to one of the lectures, haven't you?
I have. She's very, very, very knowledgeable. I've actually just looked up Jenny's call sign and found we spoke about her back in 2015. So 5 years ago now, she was involved with an RF breakout board and for use of the Raspberry Pi. So yeah, she's obviously very active and very, very, very knowledgeable. So yeah, I remember that talk, and it was very technical. I think it was about SDR technology, but yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, well, as I say, she's done some very good things, and she, in the article talks about George Dobbs's, the Reverend George Dobbs's book on making a transistor radio and a crystal set, and I'm sure that was also published by a company called Ladybird Books, and I have seen copies of it about. Ladybird Books is a children's book, but they were phenomenally well illustrated and interesting. So, Martin, what's your thoughts?
Do you know what? I've got a series of Ladybird books, all tongue-in-cheek, all about the current political things going on at the moment, and like they are brilliant. But yeah, very good. It's interesting, actually. She writes, my introduction to electronics came sometime in the 1970s in the form of simplest radios. Her dad bought a copy of this book, of course, showed me how to build a crystal set from a few parts to form a working radio. Now, I have to say, I built a crystal set when I was about the age of about 8 or 9 at the time, which is when she said how old she was at the time. I built that, and I built one from one of those kits where you have the little springs and you put the wires in, and you jam the wires in the springs between the different components. And I think that really got me hooked as well on radio. I think I built a medium wave transmitter as well. I didn't go very far, big long length of cable or wire down the garden to act an area. You could probably hear it maybe 10, 20 feet away if you were lucky. But yeah, it's interesting how people will start. But looking through some of the stuff, she's a lot smarter than me. Let's put it that way.
Well, each to their own, but it's nice that people get into this, and it's showing not only that the interesting stuff getting into radio, but it's also showing this post it's not the stereotypical amateur. It's not an old man in the shed at the bottom of his garden, because Jenny isn't any of those. So, yeah. So, Randy, Ed, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because you gave her a K call sign. So in the US, I guess she's based in the US, is she then? Because her story says that she started in the UK back in the days of the Class A and Class B licenses that you and I were facing, Martin.
Oh, right. Did I give the wrong call sign then?
A call sign G7CKF.
There you go. So it is actually a lady from the UK. I thought you'd get K something or other, Martin. Maybe I misheard you. But yeah, it's a nice article actually, and we see more and more on Hackaday about amateur radio, which is good because Hackaday is the one of the main areas for people that do technical and electronic stuff, not necessarily with RF, but as software-defined radio comes along, it's a good link between the two environments. And this lady, as I think you said, is an expert on GNU Radio, one of the software packages that you can use to write code for software radio chips. And can only say good about her and keep going. Be interesting if she ever presents at the National Hamfest or somewhere. It'd be worth a go along and listen to what she has to say. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problem, Zeb. Well, there is actually a YouTube video, I believe, up on the RSGB channel on YouTube with her doing one of her presentations at the convention. I think I saw it there a couple of weeks ago. So, yeah, it's worth a look. Frank, what's your thoughts on this one?
Very similar. Martin and I had similar experiences with crystal sets. I think there's several things about this. Hackaday has a lot of cultural currency with younger people today. It's kind of where the cool kids hang out, and that makes it okay. So when amateur radio pops up, it's a great advert for our hobby because we're suddenly placed in that context. Now, I had similar types of experiences with Ladybird books. I was unaware of the Ladybird books, but there were similar ones, and didn't get to experience George Dobbs stuff on this side of the pond, although there were others like the magazine Radio TV Experimenter. I wore those out to where I actually had airplane glue to re-glue the spine of some of those issues, just because I'd worn them out looking at them. What she does is to take her history, which I think many of us have said we share, walk through the AM radio receiver building stuff. We could all learn a lot about propagation from a regular broadcast band, transistor radio, and going through the gray line and listening to the different channels and kind of thinking about that. If the FCC on this side of the pond didn't push everybody to go digital. But who hasn't, those of a certain age, who hadn't taken an old TV set as a source apart? And if nothing else, to plunder it intellectually, to see what's going on in here. I vividly remember with some other kids who had guns to shoot TV tubes to see them not explode, but implode with the inward. And so she walks through plundering TVs into the new versions of those for younger people. The cheap SDR dongle is kind of the transistor radio. The new tools like the new radio. Her illustration shows something that young people that do audio might like. She shows how to build a total harmonic distortion analyzer. Now, I have a nice Keithley digital multimeter that will do THD analysis as well. This GNU radio with a dongle can also do that. And so she does a great article in walking people through doing this, and you can do it on the cheap. So I just fell in love with this story. Bravo to her. I would watch anything she does on YouTube, or I will continue to look for her writing. I think she's outstanding.
Yeah, I agree totally with you, Frank. Jenny List is obviously somebody that is worth listening to in our hobby. You've got great people your side of the pond, and we've also got great people our side of the pond. And Jenny's one of ours, but the culture spreads both sides of the pond, well, all around the globe, our hobby. Yeah. So hopefully people will find something from that. Bill, have we left you anything to say?
Actually, yes. I agree with Frank. Any positive press is good press, and the way she wrote the article out in Hackaday, which I encourage folks to go read. She didn't do anything that I would say is I'm trying to think of a good word to describe it. The article was basically so that all kinds of folks from all sorts of slightly technical backgrounds would get something out of it. And actually, I fell down a rabbit hole. One of the links she referenced is she used a 274 TTL logic devices. I always think of them from the 80s. But she used it to get I and Q signals out of the signal so that you can split them out of phase so they could work with an SDR. And it's just like, it's 74 AC, 74 Ds, two of them. One output gets in 0 degrees. The other output gets you your 90 degrees out of phase so that your software can do its work. I spent a ridiculous amount of time reading this article and taking notes because I was doing it much, much, much more difficult than this. So, yeah, she definitely knows her stuff, and she really has a nice way of writing articles. So it's always good to see a positive spin and presenting the hobby in a nice light.
Yeah, agree with you. So I think what we're saying, guys, is that Jenny Lynn is certainly somebody worth looking out for and listening to, and a great ambassador to our hobby. So let's wish her all of success in the future. Moving on to our next news story. The French military are seeking radio receiver jammers. Now, hang on a minute. I didn't think we were supposed to be jamming signals, but I suppose it's okay if it's the military. Frank, what's your thoughts on this one?
Wait a minute. I thought we were doing a Bob Marley episode with jamming. Did I get that wrong? Just kidding. This is interesting because today the police, particularly with SWAT teams in the U.S., do cell phone jamming already. Now, I guess they get some sort of reprieve from the FCC that says they can do that because they'll want to shut down communications in a small area to, prevent the bad guys from doing things. So it's a sign of the times. It's a tool. It'll cut down in the digital era armies who are combatants on the other side can cut down their comms. And as you used to say in Vietnam, first you beat their mind, then you beat their body. And unfortunately, in today's digital world, comms are the equivalent of the opposition's mind.
Yeah. It's an interesting concept, Frank. I mean, I was thinking in the UK, it's sort of illegal for companies to put cell phone jammers in their buildings. But I would imagine that if the government wanted to do it for certain reasons, they might get away with it. But
well, I have an example. So the prisons in the UK, there's an article, I think to recall when it's in the news, and I've just been Googling it. Back in 2012, there was talk about prisons having mobile phone jammers. It's illegal for a prison to have a mobile phone. I'm aware that there are special ones that are made that are really small, that can be hidden and secreted and smuggled into prisons. But I believe some prisons, if not all of them, have got cell phone jammers or mobile phone jammers to prevent them making phone calls and harassing victims and that sort of thing, and running drug gangs and that sort of thing from within prison. So I think there may already be, like I say, probably they probably got some sort of exemption from being able to, from the law, because they've got, I guess, a particular reason to do it.
Yeah, makes sense, Chris. Makes sense. But this is a military story as well, so yeah, and military and law enforcement certainly makes sense. They could use it as long as it doesn't interfere with the normal people behaving themselves. What do you think, Bill?
I actually found this story incredibly distressing. I've been reading a lot recently about the latest dominion of war, which is cyberspace, and this is directly related to it. A lot of military operations around the world are becoming more and more networked, interconnected, so that their command and control can make better adjustments as they do the horrible thing of war. And this is just another piece in that toolbox. And it's kind of very, very disturbing to me, actually, because I don't like war. I don't like this at all.
No, I think you're right, Bill. I think if you look at the way the world's going, wars in the future won't be soldiers firing bullets at each other. It'll be hackers taking down computer networks and governments, hacking into government systems and taking systems down, that sort of thing. That's probably got more of a disruptive thing going in the future. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that's the next battlefield, isn't it? I think is the cyberspace.
Yes, and just to highlight on that point, the military in China has a significantly large cyber capability, and we're still getting information as they're investigating the SolarWinds hack that happened here recently in the States, and that indicators are suggesting it may be Russia. And I'm starting to see indicators that it might actually be military, not the normal, criminal elements that do like the malware and stuff. This one actually seems like it might have been an intelligence operation out of the military. So very distressing to me. Very distressing. I really hope we can negotiate some peace here in the world to avoid this kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're right that World War III isn't going to be got bombs and bullets. It'll be either cyber or virus-based. And I'm not going to take it any further than that, because of the conspiracy theory, people will go for it big time. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Well, first of all, this story has nothing to do with internet. However, in theory, it could be. You could be blocking cell phone frequencies, I suppose, and Wi-Fi frequencies and the like, but this is actually jamming radio. So I'm actually surprised that the French are asking for this now. I'm surprised they don't already have it. We ran this story about 3 weeks ago on our newsline. Interestingly enough, the following week, there was another story about technology, somebody seeking to get technology to disable these kind of drone-mounted jamming systems. So as soon as one side decides they want something, the other sides decide we got to do something to stop theirs from working. But that's standard between military, I guess. And we'll wait and see what happens. But this is based for the military drones, which are really nasty pieces of work, as they've been used in North Africa to kill people literally from thousands of miles away. So, it's those kind of drones. This is not to go on your hobby drone that you play around with and take photos with. These are, basically remote controlled planes that they're talking about putting this equipment on. Yeah, the other things that Bill was talking about there also, very bad news. And whether we're already in World War III with the virus is another question, but we won't take that any further. Yeah, so it was an interesting story. We already have military signals causing us interference on the bands, but I think this particular one would be more directed in a more localized area to knock out RF frequencies. Whether those are cell phone frequencies or just normal HF communications frequencies, I'm not sure if it says in the information there or not. But military always develop new technologies. The new technologies they develop aren't necessarily for the good of the world. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I understood that. But looking at the frequencies they're looking to knock out are 30 megs to 6 gigs. So if you're a third world country, you might actually be still operating on HF. Hi. What do you think, mine?
Well, I can't help but thinking, a drone that, is running jamming technology, surely it could jam its own communications and by its own definition shoot itself down. Interesting. I'm thinking about jams. We were talking about jamming like phones and things like that. We actually had a phone hotspot in my old office, and it was one of these repeaters. You put an antenna outside facing your local mast, and it relays it inside the building. That turned out to be jamming quite a lot of mobile phone kit in our building. And when the cell provider turned up to install their new 4G network, they found all sorts of interference. I did some digging, found the people that were running it in the basement to get a signal into the workshop, got them to switch it off, and the problem went away. They disposed of it, and they were happy. I wonder why they want to jam these signals for military. Would it not be more beneficial, military purposes, to decipher what the messages are and then use that data? Thinking back to listening in like World War II and things like that. They say the devices are expected to be capable of detecting any number of transmitters operating between 30 megs and 6 gigahertz and transmit their findings in real times to a receiving station on the ground. Well, surely military normally wouldn't want to talk about this sort of stuff. And the tongue-in-cheek sort of side of me wants to say, well, if you want to avoid the military, 27 megs, there you go. Have a listen for them down there. They're not going to block you there, are they?
You're a very naughty boy, but yeah, HF will be, it wouldn't be covered by this. But anyway, it's an interesting story. It's an interesting story that they want to jam. I can understand why you would jam an area, because if you jam communications, then you effectively halt the enemy's communications, and therefore they're basically locked up and can't do anything because the chain of command's gone. Okay, moving on to our next news story. Okay, there's another new version of WSJT-X is now available, and we talked about 2.3, I believe, Bill, but release candidate 2.4 is out. Any thoughts on this one, Bill?
Yep, WSJT-X 2.3 came out last week. Go download it. Update. It's good. They fixed a lot of the low bugs we were running into. They added FST4 to it, which a lot of the folks down on the low bands are using. So that's another mode inside of it for very special stuff. And then the next day they came out with 2.4 release candidate 1, which has the Q65 mode, which we talked about the other week. The big thing is that, it's the latest release version is released. Go get it, update, because like I said, it fixed a lot of little annoying bugs and crashes that I was experiencing over time. So I haven't had that since I updated. So I think they got her fixed.
Well, that's good news. Fixes are always good. As I say, often you should always usually upgrade to the latest version to fix bugs with all software. But you need to also be aware, is there a get out in case the new version's got a bug, would be my suggestion. Frank, what's your thoughts?
I remember us mentioning this, I think the last time this team did a podcast, and I was kind of excited about it. I think I made a joke that might have been taken as a jab, and I guess it was just at the volume of stuff that comes out of Joe Taylor and his shop there. We're going to need a Joe Taylor plan, like we have a band plan to keep up with stuff. People like Bill Barnes and others who are very knowledgeable and who use it quite a bit help us with that. So I appreciate Bill's comments. I'm excited about the release candidate with the Q65, the ability to change the transmit receive periods. I think some of that will be, kind of useful for people. And it's got some things like a wide graph plotter to look at detecting signals below visibility on the waterfall plot and things like that. So I guess I'm aspirational in my comments. I'm looking forward as much to what's going to be in this next version as I am 2.3.0. But it's great to see a team of people led by somebody like Joe Taylor and Dr. Frank over at University of Illinois to have people collaborate and have people use the internet to track the data back to a repository and things like that. I continue to be impressed and amazed. And it's helped us in a slow sunspot cycle. I say once again, the reason this has become used as much as it has is because of the down cycle period we've been in. I'm not sure it would be quite as popular if we were at the peak with a gangbuster sunspot, but that's just one person's opinion.
Well, they're very valid opinions, Frank. So, that sounds good. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, perhaps the more important information is that WSJT-Z has come out with the same release, as in that's been updated to match the code. And come on, who's going to be the first to ask what's WSJT-Z?
All right, I will. Go on. What is WSJT-Z?
It's the fully automatic version of WSJT-X. No operator required.
Is that real radio?
Well, is WSJT-X? Yes, it is real radio. WSJT-X is a great beaconing system. You can tell signal strength and everything else. You can't communicate with it, but you can use it as a great propagation tool.
Yeah, all right. I was being a bit naughty. Come on, but I was just going for the effect. So. Yeah,
but JTZ's out there, and nobody seems to stop them doing it. So if you want to save actually operating, you just load that up and let your computer run your station.
There you go. Yeah. Mine, what's your thoughts on this one?
How's the DX today? Oh, great. My computer's working in another machine in the Philippines right now. Yay. Are you going to tell us we can't use the old version anymore? I'm just not excited about this software. Yes, it's very clever. It can do a lot. I struggle to keep up, but I just do wonder, rather than release all these constant new versions of software, why not just make it auto-update like Windows does, or have a little thing in the background, say, hey, you got an update. Okay, click update. Next.
Well, that's one way of doing it, I suppose.
Don't be surprised if that's not coming.
It just strikes me the obvious way around it, but I'm afraid with all this WSJT software, I'm just not excited about it. I'm sorry.
It's not something you and I do, Martin. Let's be fair about it.
I play with Whisper occasionally. It's great, but the software's become more and more buggy in the last couple of releases, and I can't get it working on my radio anymore. I've sort of just given up, really.
Right. Yeah, I can understand, because I get to the stage where if it's too difficult, I don't want to know. And I know I should be technical. I know I should be finding problems and one thing and another, but there does come a point sometimes where, and it's not just software, it's everything, that if it becomes too difficult, I don't do it. So there you go. Chris, last words on this one?
Well, not much more to add other than I'm unlike Martin, I'm actually quite impressed that they're still finding new things to do with this. Obviously, this is bug fixes, but it's also new features, new functionality, new modes that they're still working on this and they're still improving it and refining it. So, I think that's a good thing. But I'm like you, I'm not a massive digital modes fan. I have played with Whisper now and again, and I'm more of a chatter, shall we say, more of a rag chewer. So that's more my thing. But hey, each to their own. I know a lot of folks use these modes, especially when the sunspots aren't so good. So it's it's a good thing.
Yeah, know what you mean. So another one we keep an eye on. Another piece of software we can keep an eye on and go from there. Right. This was a press release, really, but I decided to run this as a news story. It was a consumer warning service. Beware of fake SDRplay devices. Now, in fairness, I know that a large number of the ICQ presenters have got at least one, if not more, SDRplay boxes. We've sung their praises how good they are. We've sung their praises how good the software is. But I'm raising this because there are a number of fake ones around. And if you end up buying a fake one, it may not work, or there's lots of other implications. Chris, do you want to go first on this one?
Well, yeah. So, if you look on some of the online typical sort of websites where you can buy, eBay, Amazon, those sorts of places, some of the other ones, you will see devices like this for sale. Now, this particular press release warns about people kind of ripping off the pictures and things from SDRplay and all proper distributors that are kind of official and just trying to sell these devices. But there are other devices out there that claim to be from SDRplay or claim to work with their software, but actually it's somebody else made it, often from the Far East. And when you buy that sort of device, it might work, it might not. You're not going to get any support if it doesn't work. And the main thing is that by buying an SDRplay device, a proper one, you're funding the guys to develop the new software and the new toys, the new things that are going to come out. But certainly, typically, the software essentially is free for SDRplay. You can download SDR for free, but you're paying for the device. If you don't pay for the device, and you're not really paying for the software, and therefore you're not helping to develop it, you're not helping the guys to fund the next version that's going to come out, that's going to have the next funky set of things you can do with it. So I would very much recommend, it might cost you slightly more, but buy the genuine article, and that way your money is going to the guys that actually developed it and not someone trying to rip them off.
Yeah, and the SDRplay guys are very, very helpful at helping you. So if you've got a proper one and you have a problem, their helpline is very, very cooperative. Frank, you've got a couple of these as well, haven't you? What do you think?
I do, and I had the pleasure of talking with some of the chaps there at the company before at the convention, and I've bought 3 of them, actually. John Hudson's contacted me in the past. He had seen a talk I'd given, and I had a diagram, and he was under pressure to do a talk somewhere. He wanted to know if he could borrow that. And here I was, just kind of pedestrian amateur radio operator, and I'd done a little talk. And here's a guy who's head of a company that's doing some major work and wanted to use my diagram. Hey, who wouldn't be flattered? You bet. You just use it. So I've had some very positive interactions with them. They've donated some giveaway product, which comes out of their profit line when I was on another network, shall we say. So there's a lot of good feeling from my end about the company and about some of the players. Mike Ladd, who does a tremendous job in their tech support and with educational videos. They are almost a model small company, in my opinion, for amateur radio or any other market there. So when you see, it's wrong for any company to rip them off and to take their product, clone it, etc., to leverage their intellectual rights. It's wrong for anybody. But somehow it's really, really wrong for a company that does all the right things ethically, too. So I read this, and I hope our listeners will give us some real thought. There's 2 ways that this is approached, I can get a cheap SDRplay by buying it from this vendor overseas. Well, you really aren't getting an SDRplay. You may think you are. Now, that's someone who's aware of what they're doing. The other side is, SDRplay, I've heard of them. The ICQ podcast I listen to has said they're great stuff. I'm going to buy one. This is a great price. So they can do it unintentionally. So I hope that our listeners, particularly this story, will realize, play fair, do the right thing. When you get on eBay, as we've been recording this, I've actually reported 6 of these clones. For on eBay, every auction, you can have a report this item, and there's 3 buttons that you click to say it's a fake, it's a copyright issue, here's the deal, and then there's a box, and you can cite SDRplay.com, and I've reported 6 of them, and somebody at eBay actually looks at that, because I've done some of that before, and they have taken the item offline. So that may be a public interest response from our listeners. If they go on eBay and they see clones of SDRplay that are using their name, using the vernacular like it works with SDR, that SDRplay paid good money to buy and license, and they give it to us if we have their software, report the item. That would be a kind of a good social justice thing. Now, that's me. That's my sermon, and I'll end with that, Martin.
Yeah, all valid points. And I remember talking to somebody a long time ago on similar sort of thing, and they bought a USB stick, and this USB, it's 128 gig or whatever it is. Yeah, it's brilliant. And at that point in time, I think 8 gig was about all that was available, and they bought it, and it came, it said, do not reformat. Okay, we'll start worrying there. But it turned out that they were probably buying rejects from the manufacturer, or, as you say, a clone that may not perform to the level that you want. And that's why we were raising this, because they are good devices. We've had a lot of success with them, and we kind of don't want our listeners to end up being disappointed. But also help SDRplay. Bill, what's your thoughts?
I agree with everyone. I actually don't have an SDRplay, but I do want to echo what Frank was saying and Chris was saying. If you like these products, you have to buy from the small company that makes them. Anytime you get a clone, you're not actually helping the company that develop software updates or the next great version. So just be careful, guys. Ask questions, check reviews. Just be careful.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, the only clone I know that's a valid clone is the Arduino, because that's open source, both hardware and open source software. But they made that so that everybody could clone it and make it as cheap as possible, because they didn't want to make money out of it. But everything else, obviously, clones create problems. Ed, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I can't add anything to what everybody else has said, because I also don't have this particular device. I would, however, echo the point that Frank made, that if you see something like this that obviously is a fake or a clone, inform. If it's eBay, inform eBay. If it's Amazon, inform Amazon. Even if it's Banggood or somebody like that, let them know. And in many cases, they will get hold of the company and find out what's going on, and probably just remove them completely from their service, because these sellers are so critical about giving a good service, because they are remote, that they will take action against people who are breaking the rules. So, your PayPal, your eBay, your Amazon, etc., use their complaints links. They do actually look at them, and they do things.
Yeah, certainly do. Martin, last words on this one, because I know you have an SDRplay.
I do, and it's a brilliant little device. I've had several SDR radios over the time of various different things, right down from the original modified TV tuner stick if you want, a sort of a mid-range one, and then the SDRplay that we got a couple of years ago at the Newark show. I always say the biggest compliment is being copied, but I think, as Chris said, this is a small company. Their support is amazing. Even the simplest questions, like, how do I do this? Why doesn't it do this? That is literally just a one setting answer that you might have wrong. I'll just click this and it'll work. They answer them really quickly for free. Buy from them and support them. If you don't buy directly from them, they've got a list of official suppliers on their website. Go to that site, find an official supplier, and buy it through them, because equally you are supporting that small business. And if you don't support the small businesses, they're not going to grow, they're not going to stick around, and you're not going to get even better products down the line.
100% on that one, 100%. So I know we laboured this, guys, but I really think that was important to raise it with you all. We all like paying as little as possible for things, so I give you that. But there's sometimes you have to just look at all the options. That's all I'm going to say. Right, moving to our last news story, and I never thought I was going to see this. Using Powerline noise to map sporadic E. Are they for real? I don't know. Bill, what do you think?
I definitely think it's real. Chris Fallon is one of the physicists that I'm not sure if he's still, I don't think he's still there, but he used to be up at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. He ran the HARP experiments back in the day, but they've had a significant amount of cuts up there due to the fiscal problems.
He's in New Mexico at Kirtland Air Force Base, Bill.
Oh, good. I'm glad he's somewhere because he's super sharp. And he posted this paper, and I started reading it, and it's like, wow. But basically, the idea is that they're using Powerline noise, and some of the Powerline noise actually follows the mid-latitude sporadic E's. So they're actually able to use that noise to kind of make a map, which, sporadic E has been studied quite a bit, but this is the first time I heard of anyone actually using, basically artificially generated noise to kind of map out the structures that kind of form from sporadic E. So it's a very fascinating paper, and I can almost guarantee this will be the first of many as they use this technique to kind of better understand sporadic E.
Yeah, I think you're right. This is something interesting here. Frank, your thoughts?
Very much like Bill. I saw this when I try to read Radio Science Journal regularly, and don't understand a lot of it, of course, but some of it I do. This one was one that I read in depth. So when I saw it on our news calendar, I pulled it back up. A couple of things for our listeners that I would add. One of the things that they use are the ionosons and digisons that are sent up. They're sensors. They go on a certain period cycle from certain locations. And if you're not familiar with the ionoson program, Google's your friend. And for amateur radio, they are an important data collection. They send a sensor up in the atmosphere, the ionosphere, it collects some data. It comes down, it bursts, and all this kind of stuff. So they use some of this, and all these data, by the way, are available. So you can become data guru over it if you want to. But I want to point to this paper. We'll have a link in the show notes. I'm sure Colin will have that. It's open access, which means you don't have to be a subscriber for a bunch of bucks to get access to radio science. I get it through my university library. And I want to point out figures 5 and 6 in their paper. Very neat graphs, and you begin to see exactly what Bill's talking about, that they're able to identify some of the sporadic E, what they call E sub S, these structures as they kind of migrate. If you think about fish in a pond swimming, not too unlike that. But figure 6 is a very easy to read frequency over time set of graphs. And it's a great visualization because it shows the mapping at 60 hertz and over time, and it's kind of amazing. And it tends to reflect larger cities. And we've all seen these maps of nighttime light as proxies for energy use. And some people have actually used them to project population and stuff. They got big errors, but, they at least trying. So this is something that if you're at all interested in how things work, you can use this paper to dive into a very important source of data. And I was enamored as much with the methods as the results, but the results, as Bill said, they're kind of amazing.
It's interesting. I think, I thought, how could you use something bad to do something good? But obviously you can. Chris, your thoughts?
Well, exactly that. I think if someone's taken a negative thing and turned it into positive, it's very, very clever being able to, use this for something good, I suppose. So, I mean, can't really comment on the technology, but I think it just sounds very cool that someone's able to, utilize the signals that we know leak out of these devices and use that to do some research. So, can't really comment much more, but I think it's very cool.
Yeah, not a problem on that one. Well, I was going to joke with Mr. Rothwell, but it would have been a little bit of an in-joke and say that the interference he gets on the repeater from a guy, about 15 miles to the west of you, could that be used? Hi.
You only wish, didn't you? Yeah, I'll be honest and say, when I saw this story, I did panic a little bit. I thought, oh no, you're not promoting the use of that PLT rubbish that the likes of BT and Sky are still pushing, are you? Oh, geez. But no, fortunately, it doesn't look like they're doing that. I'm not even going to pretend I understand the technical stuff of this. It seems to use reference the 50 and 60 hertz of the power lines and things like that. I'd love to know how they can tell where the signal is coming from, especially if it's all like the same frequency. How do we know where that is actually being radiated from? But, I'd love to get sort of a layman's term explanation of this. I've had a quick look at the stuff, but it's like well over my head. But if they can do something good with something that, as you say, is, it's a bad thing. Power line noise is terrible. We know that. But if you can make use of it, great.
Certainly is. Ed, last words on this one?
Actually, no words on this one. There's nothing I can add. The story, I've heard the story before, and I basically just echo what everybody else says, which is it's nice to hear some good coming out of interference for a change.
Certainly is. Well, that's all good. Well, that concludes the news stories. Let me find out what the guys have been up to. So let's go through my list here. Chris, do you want to go first?
Yeah, not a massive amount of radio. I've had a couple of club meetings. Last night we had quite a good Zoom chat with the guys from the clubs. That was nice. What else? You're doing quite a bit of DMR recently, and I've been chatting with you and some of the guys on the podcast. That's been pretty good. My Anytone 878 is quite impressive. I know a few of the guys on the podcast have them as well. And really pleased with that. And I'm sort of getting into DMR a bit more now. Previously, I know I've been a bit not impressed with it. I think with this radio, it's a lot easier. I think I've figured out with this one, it's a proper amateur radio rather than a PMR type commercial radio. So it's actually designed with amateurs in mind, and it does make it a lot easier, and you can see what's going on a lot better, shall we say, with this sort of device. So I'm quite impressed with that. So that's sort of mainly what I've been doing, and just a tiny bit of VHF. But there you go.
Yeah, well, we have had quite a few chats. We've even convinced Mr. Rothwell to buy an Anytone 878, didn't we, Chris?
We did, and I'm sure he'll give us his opinion a little bit later.
Yeah. Okay, Martin, go on then. What have you been up to?
Yeah, well, I did. I bought an 878. Well, I'll start from the top. I finally got PyStar working properly on my hotspot. Initially, I just thought it was a bit buggy software. It turns out it's actually just a corrupted install on my Raspberry Pi. So a reinstall and a copy of the settings back in has sorted that out. Fortunately, the support forums are really, really helpful. And you put a message on there and sort of in a day or so, you get people coming back with different suggestions. And although the people didn't come back with the exact thing, it did point me at something that, that's what it is. Click that, problem solved. It's all gone away. So that's all good. So I've been using that. It's been working really, really well. I've been using that in and around my area. As Chris mentioned, yes, I've got an Anytone 878 now. It's no secret I have to date not been a particularly big fan of DMR. To be fair, I think my previous opinions of the technology were probably let down by Motorola and high-tier gear. Now, I use Motorola radios at work. It works very well in the commercial world. They don't work very well in the amateur world. They do work, but they're not built for it. We have to bear in mind they're not aimed at the amateur market. But using the Anytone, it just works. You can do everything you want to on there. The program software is relatively easy. Yes, it's still a little bit of a learning curve, but it's relatively easy to use. You can change your talk groups and things from the front panel, and your radio is dual band as well, so you don't have to worry about, I've only got UHF with me, because, of course, our local repeater is VHF, as is my hotspot for that matter. It's unfortunate that our local repeaters are all connected to the Phoenix network for DMR, whereas the people I want to talk to are on Brandmeister. But, fortunately, Brandmeister works very, very well with my hotspots, so all good. And, really, I think I might be a DMR convert, that's for sure. And the Anytone, and this is not sponsored, by the way, the Anytone 878 is a really, really robust radio. I was pleasantly surprised. All the photos of it online looked quite cheap and plasticky, but as soon as I saw Martin's radio, I thought, yeah, that's actually quite a quality, well-made product. So, yes, I'm definitely a convert on that. Also, I've been playing a bit with D-Star and Fusion, had that on in the background while I'm working, so I'm sort of lurking around one of the digital modes while I'm working now, as well as a couple of other bands. But, other than that, not very much going on. I've been too excited playing with my new toy.
You certainly have. And I hasten to add, we're not sponsored by Anytone. We, it's just a product that the three of us have found has been very, very good. So, I know that one of our listeners, Phil Hackingbottom, down in Australia, has got one as well. And of course, I'm VK6 ADF, so Phil's got one. And he's really pleased with his. So, when you find a good product, you mention it, as you well did. So there you go. Ed, what have you been up to?
Well, I think I'd better continue the theme of DMR because I've been in lockdown in more ways than one. The weather here has been pretty awful. I've managed to get out one day to do SOTA, but generally it's not an easy option. But I have a DMR HT that I bought about 4 years ago, and it's actually a Baofeng RD5R. They're now sold as DM5R Tier 2s, but what our friend Adrian told me about, that's VK2BAC or M0GLJ, is a open software for it called OpenGD77. And as you've all been commenting, a lot of the radios that we can get hold of are meant really for the commercial market, and they're not really amateur friendly. Loading this new firmware onto my Baofeng RD5R, it's now really amateur friendly. You can do everything from the keyboard. It just feels completely different. And that same software covers the Radioddity GD77, which is the same as the TYT MD760, the Radioddity GD77S, the Baofeng DM1801 and Baofeng DM860, and as I've mentioned, the RD5R from Baofeng and also the DM5R. So if any of the listeners have those handy talkies or considering getting them, have a look at the OpenGD77 firmware. It makes them into a completely different radio. They're just so much easier to use. And that's taken up some of my time. Other time I've actually been doing some book editing that I do on some amateur radio books that I can't tell you about at the moment, but hopefully they'll be coming out most likely in summer now by the time they get reprinted. And I say what I do is the proofreading and the editing on those. So that's been taking up some of my time as well. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, sounds good, Ed. Sounds good. And the proofreading, I remember giving Edmund something to read Well, I'm going to be open, but I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is. But Edmund read a copy of the Thoughts from the Ham Shack book that Colin published about 18 months ago. And Edmund was reading my copy on the Kindle as we were flying over the States. And at one point in time, he burst into laughter and nearly wet himself at a typo. I hasten to add, and I'm sorry, for those of you who are looking for the typo, it was corrected very, very early. But yeah, typos happen. So proofreading is well worth happening, I'd suggest. Frank, what have you been up to?
Oh, you touched me there. As a retired editor-in-chief from Springer, I was finishing the galley proofs, or reviewing the galley proofs for the part 2 of the price and performance and satisfaction series in National Contesting Journal. And like Ed, I've sort of prided myself on catching errors. And I had the first galley proof screw up that I can remember in 45 years, where I had inserted the same image twice across figure 1 and figure 2. But fortunately, the NCJ issue had not gone to press, and the production editor at ARL was kind about replacing that. So those things do happen, and it falls to people like Ed and formerly me and my last day job to catch those things, but done a lot of that. What I've been doing is I've been using one of Hans Summers, our homebrew hero for 2019, his Whisper beacon, his Ultimate 3S. I have one built for 80 through 10. And some of the antennas that I've talked about in previous episodes, put in my loft, I've been sort of testing them. Brings me back to my days at 20 years of age when I built a small FM station and then a larger AM station where the FCC requires you to do a burn-in period where you show where your RF footprint's located. So I've been doing a little bit of that as I'm reorganizing my shack. And I discovered what I think is a much better, I would say superior, Whisper map database display by VK7JJ.com, and the WSPRD.VK7JJ.com is much faster, a lot more information, a lot more user control over it. Put my call sign K4FMH into that, and you'll see kind of what some of the antennas have been doing. At 0.2 of 1 watt, I continue to hit, with any propagation luck, a research station in Northwest Antarctica on 40 and 20, and hit an Australia station on 20 meters a few days ago. So been sort of testing those. The other thing, in working with the contributions of people like Ed and Bill on the steering committee for the Portable Ops Challenge, we have a new date and times for the POC in 2021. It'll be September 4th and 5th, 2021. That's September 4th and 5th. We'll have a little different format this time. We'll have 3 4-hour sprints, as some of the CW ops like to call them, kind of like the CW Open. There'll be 2 of those 4-hour windows on Saturday UTC and 1 on Sunday UTC. We think that will give some common time periods, at least for the Americas and Europe, to have some common, time periods so we can get together. Now, can't please everybody, can't do all time periods, can't do everything. However, you can participate in one of those time periods, 2 or all 3. The final scores will be determined over all 3. So if you just do 1, you may win. You can do all 3, you may win. So we've got some rules that will be updated, and they're not there now. Bill, AC0W, will be handling the draft of that for vetting by the full steering committee, and he's finishing some North America NAQRP logs that he's in charge of. FoxMikeHotel.com/challenge is the authoritative source. So thanks to Ed and Bill and the others on the steering committee for that update. New date, a little different format. We hope it's going to be better. we finally got gigabit fiber to the home. Last time we recorded where I was on, they were literally digging outside of my house. We've got that in right at 900 plus change megabits down, about the same up because it's a symmetric feed. And so I've had to do a little upgrade. I built this house 9 years ago and had some commercial, small office, home office stuff from TP-Link, and it worked fine. But the router from TP-Link, even though it says gigabit, it doesn't really do that as well. So I've upgraded to some Ubiquity stuff, got about half of that installed and tuning the router, doing some bigger, better, faster wireless access points. Got to keep my barbecue grill in the patio happy because the thermometers are on my Wi-Fi system. So I've been doing a little bit of home stuff there, continuing to do some work with Dr. Scott Wright, K0MD, on the ARL sweepstakes CW and phone logs for 2000, 2005, 2011, and 2020 that the ARL supplied us with. And we've also got some matching birth dates for those that have reported that to the ARL. So building that database, georeferencing where they're located, going to look at are there localities where you got more successful contesters, but primarily focusing on generational change. And I can give you a little preview. The baby boomers have boomed. Pre-boomers are unfortunately dying. The Gen Xers are coming in more with SSB, and the millennials are starting to make their presence felt. So that's just from a couple of passes of the data. Now, where they grow and decline in these age groups is something that we're going to document. And whether they're near or members of a contest club will be one research element that we'll look at. So give us about 3 months, and we'll probably have some results that we'll be publishing somewhere. So that's about all I've been doing, but you guys have convinced me. What I'm going to be doing after we close out the podcast is ordering me a new DMR HT, and you can guess which one I'm going to get. But I'm getting Bluetooth with mine, Martin.
Yeah, I got Bluetooth with mine. I chose the Bluetooth option because you get a little push-to-talk button that goes on the steering wheel, velcros onto the steering wheel of your car, and you can connect it to your car system. Well, I don't have a clever car at the moment because mine got wrecked, but the Works van has got Bluetooth audio in it. So I connect to the Works fan and use it in the Works fan, Frank. So there you go. It works well. Bill, what have you been up to since we last spoke to you?
I feel left out of the Anytone Club. My one friend, KB3CB, came down. When did he stop in? And we've been back in November with his 878 because he had a code plug question, which is comical because thanks a lot, Ed. My normal DMR radio is an RD5R, and I just finally got the code plug to where I was happy with it and I wasn't messing with it. And now I have 8 tabs open reading about OpenGD 77. I got to make a backup after we're done recording. Thanks a lot, Ed. So I have been doing a little DMR, including checking into the PA statewide net last night. But aside from that, I actually been doing a lot of soda chasing and, of course, some FT8. I chased Mark. NK8Q was able to get out on some summits three weekends in a row. So I was able to pick him up on 60 meters and 80 meter CW. I also actually got a Parks on the Air station. So when I tell everybody that, copy Morris, I'm shaky as all heck. So I thought I heard CQ Soda, and he sent it again. I'm like, that doesn't sound like an S. And I listened for a few minutes, and I'm like, oh yeah, POTA, Parks on the Air. So I worked him anyway, but it was funny that I only caught the end of it, and I'm like, hey, wait, who's this soda station I didn't see on the cluster? Likewise, I finally worked Marco, PH5M, probably a listener, one of my friends on Twitter. Got him on 20 meter FT8 on Sunday, finally. Actually found interesting null in my one antenna. I actually used a less than ideal antenna because I could actually hear him better on it. So I'm just assuming how the lobes worked out on the long wire on 20 meters. Which brings up the great antenna project for spring. You know, as soon as the weather breaks and I'm not shoveling snow like Ed is, I have an 80-meter loop to put up now. So that's I'm gonna take down the Windham, and you know that blew the Fallon on, and I'm gonna put up a loop in its place. So we'll see how that works, and I'll let you know in the future. But aside from that, you know, busy. 'Tis the season.
Well, it certainly sounds like you've been busy, Bill, and well, all of you. All right, well, I'm just looking at my list and thinking, which are the most contentious ones? Leave them till last. I've been mainly operating VHF and UHF, and I pretty much say that every time, but done a fair amount of DMR, both fusion and analog, while I've been driving around or whatever, and the last few days, and thoroughly enjoying it. It's keeping me very well under control. I did build another one of my interface boxes for programming the radios. I covered the feature some episodes back. I originally bought enough bits to make 2 boxes up. I made one and never got around to making the second one, so I did it at the weekend, and that's all good. Now, the other thing I was doing is I was showing somebody, I was having a conversation, and I was showing a guy. He came down, I was having a conversation on the walkie-talkie or handy-talkie outside the station, and this ex-customer came down. He was about to take the mickey, and I was in conversation with Phil Heckingbottom, VK6 ADF, and he goes, and I went, hang on a minute, Phil, tell him where you are. And like in the middle, it's the middle of winter, snow on the ground over here, and Phil says, "What? I'm in Western Australia. It's about 35 degrees, blah blah blah, and I'm in this little fishing town, and it's really great." And the guy's face dropped. And he said, "Oh, that's really clear." And you're talking to someone in Australia? I went, yeah. And I think no, but so that was quite funny. But equally, terminology. This works for me. It may work for you when you're talking to the general public. They don't have a damn clue what a repeater is. I've decided I call them, for the general public, I call them relay stations. So your signal's being relayed on. And they tend to understand a relay station, the word relay station, rather than repeater. So that might help you if you're trying to explain to a member of the public that you're using a hotspot or a repeater, that you're using a relay station. Right, the first of the contentious ones. Well, for those of you who've signed up for the ICQ email, there'll be an announcement or a couple of announcements going out fairly soon via email about what we're up to. We're up to a couple of other bits and pieces. Colin's going to send the emails out fairly soon when they're confirmed. But if you haven't signed up for the emails, you know, you might get the information a week or so later. So, you know, worth signing up for the emails. And the last one, and I'm sorry to say this, and I know Chris and Martin will have feelings on this one as well. It appears that the Royal Naval Amateur Radio Society will no longer be on board HMS Belfast. The IWM, the Imperial War Museum, who owns the ship, has told them that they have to remove their kit. Interestingly, they've said, we're not evicting you, we're just asking you to move all your kit out. And they're refurbishing it, and they want to put it back to all old stuff and make it a static display, which I think personally is a wrong thing, but they're not listening. They never turned up when we were there. Often when Chris and I were there, we do in excess of 100 more certificates for the children and parents. And in fairness, by the time you've walked round, if you go round in the correct order, you've been on the ship about 2.5 hours before you get to the radio room. And the radio room had the only bit of public interaction, really. There are people wandering around, but we were the only static there all the time. And, you know, I've seen the joy we brought to people's faces by doing more than that. but unfortunately, it ain't going to happen any longer. So I know some of you listeners have joined me on HMS Belfast, and some of you might have had plans to do it once the lockdown's finished, but unfortunately, we won't be there. I think it's a sad state of affairs. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, well, it is, but end of the day, it was good while it lasted. It's not our ship. We were always privileged to go and do it, and things have changed. So, it's entirely their choice, at the end of the day. So, a little bit of a shame, but, like I say, not something to do much about.
Yeah, we'll find something else to do. Okay, so that's effectively what I've been up to. So don't forget to sign up for that newsletter. Right, I'd like to thank each and every one of you guys for joining me tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, guys. Another fun one.
Yeah, good one. I'd like to thank Mr. Rothwell, Rothwell, M0SGL.
You're very welcome. Have a good one.
Thank you, mine. I'd like to thank Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Yep, thanks a lot, Martin. Hope to catch the guys on the radio during the week. Yeah,
we hope to work here as well. Also, I'd like to thank Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH, who I've just made spend probably about $200. I'm sorry, Frank.
Well, you make it to spend. It's just what you spend it on, I guess, is the difference. Thanks for having me this time, Martin.
No problems, Frank. Always a pleasure. And last but not least, and we always seem to leave you last, Bill, but nothing personal. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Bill Barnes, WC3B.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the invite.
All right. So 73 is all, and we'll continue with the podcast. 73.
73.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin, M6BLY. We start off with news here regarding ARRL Field Day, and the rules from 2020 will continue in this June's event, with the addition of power limit imposed on Class D home stations and Class E home stations emergency power participants. So the event will take place 26th, 27th of June, and what it's going to mean is that Class D and E stations will be limited to 150 watts PEP output, and an aggregate club score will be published just as it was done last year. The aggregate score will be a sum of all individual entries that are attributed to their score for a specific club. So we'll obviously put more information about this on the ICQ podcast webpage, but good news there that the ARRL are adapting things during these times for Field Day this year. The RSGB are continuing to have great success with their Get on the Air to Care campaign, and they held a construction competition for projects being made during the autumn 2020 lockdown period, which covered Christmas and New Year. The society received 27 entries from 15 entrants, and the standard was very high. So instead of offering a single prize, the RSGB decided to offer 4 prizes instead. The overall winner was Gordon Lean, Golf 3 Whiskey Juliet Golf, but as a runner-up, Paul Graham, Mike 0 Papa Golf X-Ray, Lawrence Fletcher, Golf 4 Sierra X-Ray Hotel took 3rd prize, and a highly commended award went to Robert Lynch, Mike 0 November Victor Quebec. So congratulations to all involved, and as I say, they can continue to support the RSGB's Get on the Air to Care campaign. Popular online radio club Essex Hams have announced that 245 people have joined their free amateur radio foundation training course, which has just recently started. And due to the popularity of this course, they're planning on starting another course on the 21st of February. There seems that the introduction of online exams that can be taken at home has led to a surge in demand, as I say, so they will be running extra courses from there. We've got a link on ICQpodcast.com if you've got any friends or family that wish to take their foundation exam, or if you're not yet ticketed in the UK, this could be a great opportunity to get involved with the guys at Essex Hams. So we'll pop that link on the ICQ podcast webpage for you. Now it's time to head over to our features episode, which is a feature discussing the joy of VHF and above, with Tim Kirby, Golf Whiskey 4, Victor, X-Ray, Echo. As always, guys, hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Well, hi guys, welcome to this episode's feature. Tonight I have Mr. Tim Kirby, GW4 VXE, who's going to talk to me about his adventures with VHF and UHF, which is actually something that you guys know I'm quite passionate about. Now, Tim gave this talk, or a very similar talk, to the Sutton and Cheam guys earlier in the month, and unfortunately I missed it. But Tim obviously works a lot in the UK with VHF and UHF, but some of the tips he'll give you are equally just as valid anywhere in the world, I would suggest. So without further ado, Tim, very quickly, give us a quick resume or a quick bio of yourself. When did you get started in the hobby, and what made you move towards VHF and UHF?
Hello, Martin. Well, it's lovely to be with you, and thanks for the invitation. Crumbs, I've been licensed since 1983, I think it was. I started off with what was then a Class B call sign, G6TTU, and in those days had to do a Morse test as well, which took me sort of 8 or 9 months to get around to doing. But I always remember just after I got my G4 call sign, which was G4 VXE, I grew up in Cheltenham in Gloucestershire, so I was still a G at that point. And I think most people in those days when they got their Class A licence go on to HF. Well, for some reason I went on to 77s. I got one of the little FT790 radios. I'm sure you've seen them around. They were about a watt of FM, CW and sideband. I think we used to call them talking handbags at the time. And I got one of those and started making FM contacts across the town and put a 70SEMS beam up on the house. And I remember somebody saying, it's really unusual that somebody who's just got their G4 call would go on 70SEMS. But that fascinated me, and the VHF, UHF bands have always interested me. Even just after I was licensed, I started to play around with meteor scatter on 2 meters. That was great fun. In those days, it was either single sideband or CW, high-speed CW. You wound your keyer up as fast as it would go, and to receive the high-speed Morse, you used a tape recorder, a cassette tape recorder, which we modified and slowed the speed down so you could understand what was being sent. So, I used to do crazy things like that. So VHF, UHF's always kind of been with me. That's not to say I don't enjoy HF or other parts of the hobby as well. But I always find a fascination in VHF and UHF, and I suppose that's lasted about 38 years so far, Martin. So there's always new things to learn. And one of the things I was telling the Sutton and Cheam guys the other day is that the way that we can operate using digital modes these days, I feel I've learned more in the last 2 or 3 years about propagation than probably the previous 35. So that makes it really interesting for me.
Yeah, it certainly does. And like yourself, I started off with a B class licence, being an M1, and in fairness, I was having far too much fun on VHF and UHF and never really got into HF, even when they gave us the full HF privileges. I think it was about 2 years before I got an HF rig. I do go on HF, but I do actually like VHF. And you were talking about the FT790. Over the years, I've had all 3 of them. I've got a 290 Mark 1. I had about 3 of those, but I've got one now. It's a bit sick, and one day I'll repair it. I had a 690 and a 790, and they were great devices. And the beauty of them was they were very, very low current draw as well. There weren't many watts, but low current draw, so you could take them out portable, couldn't you?
You could, like you. I think I've had all of them as well. I've got a sick FT290 upstairs, which has got no transmit on it, which I need to have a look at, and I've got a not quite as sick but slightly sick FT790 as well. But actually, one of the ones that I remember really fondly is the FT690. One of the very exciting things about 6 meters, as I'm sure you know, is the sporadic E-season, which is generally from perhaps late April going into July. During that time, you can have extremely strong signals from around Europe, perhaps further afield, but the one-hop sporadic E openings are really strong around Europe. And I remember having an FT690 in the garden of my parents' house in Cornwall. They were in Cornwall at the time, and I remember working San Marino T77C on the little whip antenna of the FT690, and just sat in the garden in Cornwall. It was lovely, and that's one of my sort of really memorable QSOs with the 690. I'm sure there were others as well, but it's great fun to do something like that just with the whip antenna.
I've not done it with the whip antenna, but in fairness, I have an ICOM 703, which is the 10-watt QRP rig, and summertime is great fun. I often go out with just a halo. I've got a 6 meter halo, put it up on a pole, and 6 meters can be real fun, as you say. Yeah, there's a lot going on in the hobby at the moment on VHF, as you well said.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating. The wintry season is something that a lot of people don't necessarily automatically know to listen for. There's the summer sporadic E, but the wintry season, which generally starts just after Christmas and sort of runs into January, can be quite interesting, and you can make some interesting contacts around Europe. And actually, just the other day, there was quite exceptional propagation. We were hearing stations from the Middle East, a couple of stations from North America. So it's not just in the summer as well. So that kept me on my toes the other day.
Well, I'd say one of the things that you know as well as I do, if you're driving around listening to your normal broadcast radio on VHF, around about 88 to 108, often you start hearing stations coming in from that you wouldn't expect. That's one of the good times in my books to go get your VHF gear out, because there's obviously an opening.
I love it when that happens. Yeah, completely. That can be a really good indicator, particularly in the summer with sporadic E. If you're starting to hear band 2 FM from somewhere interesting, then it's definitely time to get the 2 meter radio out and point it towards Europe or something like that. So yeah, that can be good fun. And I was just thinking, as you were talking about driving around as well, another fun QSO I had, I think it was an FT817 in the car, and a quarter wave whip on for 6 meters some years ago. And I remember being parked up at the station, having just got there from working in London, and hearing 1A0KM, the Knights of Malta special station from Rome. And all I had was 3 watts and this mobile whip, and I managed a QSO. That was really nice. I think that was a new country for me. So I was really thrilled to do it with simple stuff like that. So yeah, it's really nice when you can make a simple contact with sporadic E and so on. So many stories of that sort of stuff. It's brilliant fun.
Well, I think we've got the people interested now. So yeah, I do it because it is great fun doing those. I remember very silly, and this was 5 watts onto the mobile whip on top of the car. I was on Jersey one day, and I was waiting for the club to open. And the guys, I worked somebody in Weymouth, and they said to me, You can't be running 5 watts. We always run 50 watts here because we want to talk to Jersey. And I said, well, I'm only running 5. I said, because I'm sitting outside. I don't want to flatten the car battery before the boys arrive. And they shut down to 5 watts. And, of course, it was straight across the sea. There's nothing in the way. You don't need mega amounts of power, So I think a lot of people don't they go instantly for the power, as you say. And VHF and UHF goes a lot further than most people think. And certainly the guy was absolutely gobsmacked when he went down to 5 watts and still worked me with the same signal strength.
I mean, sea paths are the best thing ever. It's amazing what can happen and the variation that you get in signal strengths. We're about a mile away from the Irish Sea here, and we've got Ireland across the water. And it's incredible the variation that I see in signal strengths. The Mount Leinster repeater on 70 SEMS is always S9 plus. That's sort of given. But the 2 metre repeaters a little bit further off over around Cork and Waterford and so on, they can, some days they will be S9 plus, and other days I can barely hear them. It's just wonderful to sort of watch what happens with the conditions across the water. And I'm also very, very lucky with my sea path down to the southwest. Been lucky enough to work into the Canary Islands on 70 SEMS with just a vertical antenna. I've even heard the Cape Verde Islands, which is 4,500 K away on 70 SEMS. I haven't had a QSO with them yet on 70. But I have on 2 just with the vertical antenna. So yeah, if you're in the right place at the right time, across the water, some really magical things can happen. I love it.
You certainly can, and as you said, you've got to be in the right place at the right time. And there's often lots of people listening. It only takes one person to call, and if you're that person that does the call, you get the pile up, don't you?
You do, and I think there's lots of different feelings about FT8, aren't there? But I think one of the things that we've really seen over the last 2 or 3 years is that we've seen that even the smallest openings start to get noticed now, because everybody's listening in the same place. You can say that's a good thing or a bad thing, but everybody's listening in the same place for signals. So if there's just one slight bit of propagation, then it's amazing what people will hear. And I think we've seen a great deal more exploitation of those interesting conditions since we've had propagation testing modes like Whisper and particularly FT8 in the last 2 or 3 years.
So what would you suggest to be not a top-notch station, but the station which would get somebody who's interested in having more of a good look at VHF, UHF? What would you suggest they really need?
Well, it's everybody wants to have the best equipment they can, but you can get away with all sorts of things if you're interested in VHF, UHF propagation. If you've got an FM rig, an aerial in the loft, or a simple aerial outside, then that's a great starting point. It's perhaps not going to work all sorts of DX, but you never know. One of the things I say to people if they've got an FM rig is, well, if you have, program up all the different repeater channels, particularly the ones that are normally quiet for you. Program those up and scan those when you're in the shack. And then what you'll notice sometimes is that you'll suddenly hear a signal just pop up. I think, I don't normally hear something on there, and you find out what it was. I had a lovely example of that some years ago. I was monitoring, it was 2 meters, and the rig stopped on this repeater channel, and a foreign language was coming up, and I'm not a great language expert. I'm not bad. I recognise a lot of European languages, but I didn't recognise this one at all. And these guys were chatting away for 10 or 15 minutes, and I'm sure they were giving their call signs at the end of of the overs, but I couldn't understand what they were. And fortunately, there was a CWID on this repeater, and it sent its call sign in Morse, and it was in Norway. And I thought, wow, okay, that's interesting. And that I popped down to sideband and pointed a beam out across the North Sea, and there was nothing to be worked there, and came back. They were still there on FM, and I think the opening lasted sort of 10 or 15 minutes, and then sort of faded back down into the noise. But that sort of thing can happen really easily using nothing more than an FM rig and a simple aerial. And I've had contacts in the other direction when there've been decent conditions down towards France. I remember having a QSO with a station in Marseille on 2 meters FM one day. Not directly, it was a contact through a repeater, but the repeater was in the Alps somewhere. It was just above Marseille, and it was really good fun doing that. And I think a lot of people say, "Oh, well, working stations through a repeater isn't DX," and I kind of get that, but my station was making it all the way down to the Alps, so I think that's okay. So that's kind of an example of what you can do with simple FM equipment, and of course you can do more with if you've got a sideband rig, perhaps. If that will be quite interesting. I spent a lot of time in the last 2 or 3 years with nothing more than a simple vertical aerial, a sideband rig, a computer interface, and playing FT8. And even with the simple vertical antenna, which, historically speaking, I think VHF enthusiasts would have always said you should use a beam. But I was able to make loads of contacts. I think the furthest one was Greece. It was over 2,000 kilometres. And I was really excited because I'd never worked Greece before, certainly not on sidebands with a beam antenna and an amplifier, and here I was working it with 50 watts to a vertical antenna. So it's all possible. It depends what gear you've got access to. I think we'd all like superstations, but you don't actually have to spend loads of money. It's remarkable what you can do with very simple equipment.
It certainly is. And what you're saying about using a vertical, okay, most people maybe would have been using a horizontal beam of some description or a dipole. But if propagation's up and, you're doing something like Sporadic or whatever, it's going to screw with the what's the word?
You're absolutely right. By the time that the signal has been reflected from the E layer, the polarization that you launched the signal with is probably twisted around, and who knows what's going to happen. And as we were saying when we were talking about the FT690 a little bit earlier, if you're in the right place at the right time with the Sporadic E, it almost doesn't matter what sort of aerial you've got. So exactly that. And with the vertical antenna, let's say we're talking about Tropo or something like that. The other thing that I noticed an awful lot of, sort of more domestically, if you like, was aircraft scatter, and it was incredible. Of course, with a vertical antenna, what you will find is that you get a lot more radiation going up towards the sky than being forced down towards the horizon that you'd have with a horizontal antenna. So, of course, the side effect of that is that it's very good for signals go up, find an aircraft, and bounce back down to ground. So you can make some really exceptional contacts with aircraft scatter. FT8 works very well for that because the aircraft isn't going to be in the right place to reflect your signals for very long, unless you get very lucky with the geometry. So the sort of automated nature of FT8 means that you can probably swap one or two overs as an aircraft goes overhead. If you haven't managed to complete a contact, then you just wait for the next aircraft to come along. So it can sometimes take 15 minutes or something like that. And I noticed that from here. We're out on the west coast of Wales, and in ordinary times we've got a steady stream of aircraft coming over from London, heading towards North America or Ireland, which are wonderful reflecting areas. So you see all these signals come up on the FT8 waterfall, and it's like sort of waves coming over as an aircraft comes over. It reflects all the signals, and you can try and work them. So aircraft scatter, lots of fun. There's some brilliant software if you're interested in that. It's called AirScout. Have a look at airscout.eu, and what that does is that I put in where I am. I put in the end point of the station that I want to work, or perhaps I want to listen to a beacon, so I put the locator in there. So AirScout knows about the path that I want to work. I put what frequency I want to do that on. And AirScout pulls in the aircraft information from Flight Radar 24, I think it is. And it looks to see when an aircraft is going to cross the path, and reflect the signals back to me from the remote station. Absolutely brilliant, and it's a wonderful way to spend an hour or two listening to a beacon, say in the Netherlands or something like that, waiting for an aircraft to come over, and just to hear that weak CW signal for a few moments. Brilliant fun. Highly recommended.
I'd never tried that, so that is certainly something that sounds very interesting to me, and that's great. There is obviously lots you can do. I mean, we've talked about doing straight one-to-one contacts across the ground and doing repeaters. And polarization did come to me after you said it, by the way, Tim.
Mm.
I assume you've played a little bit with satellites, being that VHF and UHF really kind of lend themselves to that, don't they?
They do. Satellites really good fun. We're almost in a little bit of a sad point with satellites at the moment. If we'd been having this discussion about 3 or 4 months ago, I'd have told you how wonderful the AO91 and AO92 satellites were, and how easy they are to hear with a nice strong 2-meter downlink, and you go up on 70 SEMS, and those two were FM satellites. Oh, I used the word were. Well, they're still up there, but the battery on both of those satellites is not in a good state. So unfortunately, they're both switched off at the moment. We're kind of hoping that if the satellites are switched off for a little while, the batteries will recover. We'll get a bit more goodness out of them, but they certainly are towards the end of their lives. But yeah, satellite operation is really good fun, and I always recommend people start off with FM satellites. So there are a few FM satellites up there at the moment. There's the venerable SO50, which is 2 meters up and 70 SEMS down. You can use a simple handheld to make a contact through that, albeit you'll probably need some sort of little beam antenna. You've probably seen there's a couple of different antennas which are dual band 2 meter and 70 SEMS beams. There's the Arrow, which is very popular with satellite operators. There's the ELT, which is a little 2 meter 70 SEMS log periodic. There's some other ones around as well, and they're absolutely ideal. They're 2 bands on the same boom. Connect that up to your handheld, and if you've got a handheld which will do full duplex, then so much the better. A lot of people start off with semi-duplex. So what do I mean by that? So semi-duplex is where I'm transmitting on 2 meters, and I can't listen at the same time on 70 SEMS to the satellite. It's not ideal, because if somebody else is transmitting at the same time as me, then I'm causing a little bit of interference to them. So it is better to be able to operate full duplex if you can. But that shouldn't let you start if you're starting off and you've just got a simple, something like a Baofeng handheld that will only do semi-duplex. Then start off with that. That's absolutely fine, and you can make some really interesting contacts on the satellites. Start off with FM. Of course, there's the linear transponders as well. Something like RS44, which is that's going up on 2 meters and coming down on 70 SEMS. And there's AO7, which is, it's not quite as old as I am, but it was launched back in the 70s, I think, and lasted a few years. The batteries gave up on it, and everybody thought they'd heard the last of it. And then a few years ago, the batteries on AO7 went open circuit. So when the satellite is in sunlight, the solar panels just about produce enough electricity to power the satellite, and it came back to life. And that's a really good satellite if you're interested in a linear transponder. So that's 70 SEMS up, 2 meters down, and it's in quite a nice high orbit, so you can make QSOs over into the States, not quite to the Pacific coast, but most of the way across. And that's really good fun. And I love highlighting the sort of zombie satellite where they seem to die, the batteries go, and then a miracle happens, and the batteries go open circuit, and they come back to life again. So plenty to enjoy on the satellite. Oh, and the other thing that people can maybe listen for at the moment is the ISS crossband repeater. That's got a 70 SEMS downlink and a 2 meter uplink. It does get very, very busy, but it's certainly worth a listen. And from memory, I can't remember the downlink frequency. It's on 437 megs somewhere, but just Google ISS crossband repeater, and you'll see the appropriate frequencies. So that's something that's fairly easy to hear, even if you're just using a simple handheld and a rubber duck. Go for when the ISS is coming directly overhead, and you should hear that.
You certainly should, and that's a good one. Now, Tim, over the last few years, I mean, you got licensed far earlier than I did, but these things weren't around when I got licensed, 20 years ago. We didn't have digital voice. We didn't have D-Star, DMR, or Fusion. They are the three main digital voice modes. There are one or two others, but they're the main ones us amateurs are using. What's your thoughts on these?
I enjoy them. I think I've got a rig for all of those here, and I've got a hotspot. I find it interesting because my work was with computers, so I always enjoy sort of trying to make things work. Well, it can be a bit sweary to get it to work sometimes, can't it? But once you get it working, it's quite interesting. And one of the things I really like about digital voice is the fact that you can have a contact with somebody who's perhaps on the other side of the world, but they don't have an HF license or whatever, and you can have a really fascinating conversation with them, learn about them and where they live, and what they're interested in, and for people that are perhaps interested in VHF, UHF, as I tend to be, it's nice to meet other people like that who wouldn't necessarily think of going on HF. And of course, the clarity of digital voice itself is superior to single sideband on HF. So you really get a high quality contact, don't you? I mean, this isn't quite digital, but I remember when Echolink first appeared, and I suppose that was in the very late 90s or early 2000s, can't quite remember now. But I was living in Windsor at the time, and the local repeater GB3BN over at Bracknell put Echolink on there, and I remember a station calling through from Hong Kong, and it was wonderful because you could hear him very clearly, but you could hear the noise of Hong Kong coming through his window, and I thought that was amazingly atmospheric. And of course, that sort of thing happens with digital voice all the time. So I do find that very interesting and thoroughly enjoy some QSOs on there. So yeah, great fun. I'm always up for playing around with that stuff.
Yeah, well, before the It's Not Real Radio Brigade give us earache, Tim, and I'm one of them. I use one as well. I think a hotspot it certainly has advantages. Sometimes you cannot reach a repeater. You may only be doing VHF 6-8 feet to your hotspot. But that doesn't mean to say that when it comes out the other end on a repeater somewhere, it isn't going 30 or 40 miles. So you're still, in my books, you're still pretty much the same as using a repeater. I mean, for argument's sake, my hotspot's in my house. The local fusion repeater is about a mile away from my house. There's very little difference between using a hotspot and using a repeater that's close to you. So, I think they have their advantages, and they certainly help people, don't you think, Tim?
They do, and I want to tackle the "it's not real radio" thing head on. I'm sorry, I've got no time for that. If you don't enjoy a particular aspect of the hobby, then that's absolutely fine. I completely respect that, but please don't tell me what I should or what I shouldn't do in the hobby. That doesn't sit well with me at all. So that's the toned down version of that one. But yeah, I think, hotspots, I think the other advantage is you can play around. Let's say it's a DMR hotspot or something like that. You can think, I quite fancy listening to this talk group or that talk group, and you can switch it over as often as you like without annoying a whole bunch of other people on a repeater as well. So I think hotspots are really interesting. And one of the things when we moved here, first of all, I was keen to get on the air very quickly. I threw a bit of wire out of the window on HF and went on 40 meters CW and worked somebody. So that was the first QSO. Then I tried some satellite QSOs, because you can do that from pretty much anywhere. So that was nice as well. And then I got my hotspot and tethered it to my mobile phone, which gives 3 or 4G connectivity, which is enough, and was able to have some nice QSOs via DMR. So it's a great thing in the toolkit. You don't have if you don't like it, that's cool. Don't use it.
Yeah, I give you that. And as I will say, and it's quite strange. I've had the hotspot running indoors last couple of weekends on CQ UK, the Fusion CQ UK. And to me, I'm guessing it sounds pretty like much what 2 meters used to sound like back in the 70s. There's continual conversations going on all day. In fact, my poor little Yaesu radio, the battery runs out at the end of the day. But it can be very busy. And I think at the moment people are complaining there's not a lot going on. But once you find out where everybody is, it still can be very busy, and it may be.
I think that's true. Yes, as you say, CQ UK is very very busy. The guys that run that have done a remarkable job connecting it to all sorts of other networks and have cross connections and so on. So it makes it very accessible from various other networks as well. HubNet is another one. I don't know if you've come across that one, Martin, but HubNet's really interesting. The same sort of principle, very, very well connected. There are some nodes which people run in their houses, which they can connect to HubNet through, or some repeaters, analog repeaters. There's GB3HN I'm thinking of up in Shropshire is a HubNet repeater. We've got one over here in Wales as well. and people can connect up through Echolink and so on. And as you were saying with CQ UK, there's very few quiet moments during the day. There's always some sort of conversation going on. So I think if you want to go and chat to somebody, which I think a lot of people do, or just listen, and then sometimes that's nice to do as well. Then those are great places to listen.
They certainly are. They certainly are. Well, Tim, I also know that you write for Practical Wireless. You write the World VHF column in Practical Wireless. You also write for Radio User magazine. So you're fairly active in print as well. Would tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, how lucky am I to be able to write about the stuff I love doing. I've written odd articles, probably with the emphasis on the odd, for many years, probably over 20 years, I suppose. I had a chance back in the late 90s to write for Radcom about contesting. I was very active in contesting at the time. And, times changed and I wasn't doing so much contesting, so I kind of stopped doing that. And very shortly after that, my friend Dave, G4ASR, who was writing for Practical Wireless at the time, the VHF column, he wanted to stop doing that. We'd written a newsletter together many years ago for the RSGB, and he said, "Well, do you fancy a go at it?" And I said, "Oh yeah, why not?" So he said, "Well, I'll put in a good word for you with the then editor Rob Mannion," and Rob very kindly gave me a chance to write for the world of VHF for Prac Wireless, and that's what I've been doing ever since. And it's lovely, it's great to write about what's been going on, what's new in the hobby, what people have been working, what people want to do, and I love trying to do it and trying to enthuse people about what's going on. It's so rewarding when you get you get the occasional email. Well, they're all like gold dust, of course they are, but you get these emails from people say, "Oh, I read your article, and it inspired me to have a go at something," and that's just fantastic when you get something like that. And of course, the other really nice thing I get to do is play with equipment, both in PW and Radcom. Lucky enough to do some reviews of different equipment, generally VHF, UHF related, and try them out. And historically I've not done I'm not in a position to do sort of highly technical receiver measurements or something like that. So it's tended to be the sort of review. Well, how did I find it to use? Did I find it easy to use? Did it work well? Those sorts of things. And absolutely wonderful to try that sort of thing out. And it's lovely when you get some equipment in to try out and you put it on the air and see what it can do. So yeah, very lucky indeed.
Yeah, well, we all like playing with new pieces of kit. I've seen one or two that come from China that wasn't particularly good, and we said so at the time. I've also seen some very, very good stuff, and I was talking to my colleague Martin Rothwell, M0SGL, the other week about the Anytone DMR radio I've got, and he was saying, they look very plastic, they don't. And he came around the other day, and I just put it in his hand and said, "What do you think?" And he went, "That's far better. That is so much better than the picture. It's actually a nice feel to it. It's the right size and all those sort of things." So I think sometimes a user review rather than a technical review is pretty much what we need, because I know, having spoken to Rob Sherwood, you can do all the tests, you can do all the bits and pieces, but the Bain radios don't change that much. And when I worked for a radio dealer back a good few years ago, the thing is, it's often what you like the look of, what fits in your hand. If they all work very much equally, it's how easy is it to use, how intuitive it is. And if you like the look of it, you'll use it. If it's pig ugly, as I used to say, you're never going to sit in front of it.
No, absolutely true. How easy is it to use? And I think the Anytones that you mentioned there are a really good example of that. There's lots of DMR radios around, aren't there? Handhelds. The Anytone 868 and 878 in particular, I'm thinking of. They just kind of do what they're supposed to without any fuss or faff or having to find your way around it. Whereas some of the other DMR rigs, you can almost always get them to work, but sometimes you have to fight through them a little bit. Whereas something like the Anytone will just kind of work, won't it? And I think, as you say, does it was great that you mentioned Rob Sherwood. He does all those fantastic measurements so that we don't have to, because it's so interesting to look at what he finds. And the new rig from Yaesu, the FTDX10. I think it's a fairly sort of entry level type rig. Well, not quite entry level, but the receiver on that was about the third in the list so far. So that's looking really good. So yeah, great stuff.
Yeah, I haven't had my hands or been able to get hold of one of those to have a good look at it yet. So I would imagine it'll be a pretty good rig, and usually the performance from the big three is usually pretty good there. So, Tim, I'm going to close the interview up fairly shortly, but if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, how would they get in touch with you?
And it's always really nice to hear from people, as long as it's not about real radio. But yeah, you can find my contact details on qrz.com with my email address, or Twitter's another place to find me, where I'm GW4VXE. Always nice to hear from people. So yeah, email or Twitter, that works really well.
Well, that's great. That's great, Tim. And I've taken a fair amount of your time. We've covered quite a large thing. I look forward to maybe catching up with you at some point in time. I don't know if you go to the National Ham Fest. If it's on this year, we're hoping to be there. Maybe we'll meet up with you there.
Yeah, that would be really good. Yeah, well, let's hope that we get back to some sort of normality once it's safe to do so. We're very lucky, aren't we, to be able to speak to people on the air and so on. But it is nice to see people as well. So fingers crossed. Well, thanks so much for your time, Martin. Really enjoyed it. And thanks to everybody that's been listening.
Well, that's good, Tim. I'll say 73s to you, and stay safe and keep enjoying the radio.
You too. Take care.
Whether it's across the pond or over the channel, the ICQ podcast is international.
Herzlich willkommen in Deutschland. 73 de España.
By amateurs, for amateurs.
Well, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed our interview with Tim Kirby, Golf Whiskey 4, Victor X-Ray Echo, and his discussion and joy of operating at VHF and above. And Dad, certainly a very enjoyable interview there with a very knowledgeable Tim.
Yeah, very interesting, and he's interested in what I'm interested in, so it made it a very interesting and easy interview to do. And he was mainly talking about the joy and the things you can actually do, and some of it maybe people wouldn't have thought of, but hey, that's what it's all about, listening to other people and what their successes are.
True. Well, that's what I always say we're here for, to generate thoughts, opinions, and ideas of the hobby. So hopefully everyone got something from the feature there with Tim. Now, we'd like to thank feedback from David Kavanagh Victor Kilo 4 Delta Alpha Kilo. He tells us as well that thank us for a fantastic podcast, and he's let us know that he has a node that downloads every episode, and he makes it available to listeners via 7-link repeaters across Queensland in Australia. And it's a play on demand feature, and they get lots of feedback that the listeners really enjoy listening to the show. And so, David, we really thank you for helping the ICQ podcast stretch out to a larger audience. Now, some people might think, well, that's a bit weird, why are you allowing this to happen? The ICQ podcast is available on a Creative Commons license, which basically means you can rebroadcast the show in its entirety, as I say, and redistribute it as much as you like to the greater benefit of the amateur radio hobby. So we really would appreciate the work that David's doing there. And isn't it great, Dad, that David's helping us grow our listenership in Queensland, which is probably one of the furthest parts away from us in the world.
It certainly is. And, that's great. And we really do appreciate that. We have on a number of occasions been asked if people can take part of our feed and cut it around and all those sort of things. And we believe that because we don't take advertising, if others were to take our feed and cut it about and slip adverts in it and one thing and another, it wouldn't be the ICQ podcast. So, we try and remain true to our beliefs of it should be advert free. If we recommend a product or we talk about a product, it's usually because we believe, no, let's get straight. It's not usually, it is because we believe that the product is really good and we recommend it. So, I'm pleased he does this, Colin.
Exactly. Now, talking about our donation model, which helps us pay our way, we need to thank Terry Perry, who's currently studying there for his technician license in the United States. So hopefully, Terry, you'll be letting us know very soon that you've been successful and you've got your ham ticket there in the States. And of course, our monthly and annual subscription donors, which provides a wonderful base to help us pay our way. If you found value from today's show, all you need to do is visit icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you can send our way is always greatly appreciated and shows the wonderful value in the show. There are other ways, obviously, of showing how you can support, and maybe you could do something similar to David Kavanagh there in Australia and help publicise us by putting us on websites or, let's say, liking links, etc. So any way you can help spread the word is always greatly appreciated. Right now, we need to thank the guys who joined you, Dad, on the News Round Table. That's Chris, Mike Zero, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike Zero, Sierra Golf Lima, Ed, DD5, Lima Papa, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3, Bravo, for joining on the News Round Table there. So thanks, guys, for getting involved. As Dad mentioned earlier in the show, there are announcements coming your way of a new service that we're launching to supplement what we do here on the ICQ podcast. And the best way of finding out about it first is to make sure you're a subscriber to the ICQ podcast newsletter. You can do that in many ways. If you visit icqpodcast.com and click on the newsletter link there, there's a way to sign there, or there's various sign-up boxes around the website. So if you want to make sure you're aware of the new announcements that's going to be launched hopefully in about next week, make sure you're on that newsletter. Otherwise, you have to wait till show number 345 to find out what's going on. So we'll let you know from there. So is there any other thing to let you know about, guys? If you're feeling as though you're missing your ham ventures, etc., check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ICQ podcast, where there are videos, etc., of some of the events we attended in the old days before the lockdowns, etc., that might keep whetting your appetite for things that are going on in the hobby in the meantime. So feel free to check out that channel there. Right, I think we're just about wrapped up over there, Dad. I think we've ticked all our boxes. Just check your list to make sure there's nothing else that we need to let anybody know.
Not at the moment. As I say, the most important thing is the email list, as you've said, because we're working hard here at ICQ Podcast to keep your enjoyment up for you, and I think a lot of people will like what we're going to tell you in the next episode. So back to you, Colin.
No, well, fantastic. There. Well, look, let's wrap this one up, as they say. As an important thing now is I need to send you off to make Mrs. B a cup of tea, and as I say, it's Valentine's weekend, so maybe a nice rose or a bunch of flowers to go with it this weekend, rather than the usual chocolate biscuit.
No. She said to me, those roses are too expensive. Don't get them. I'll have a chocolate biscuit instead. So I don't. But don't anybody ever say Mrs. B's cheap, because I tell you, she ain't. She's an expensive woman, but in the nicest possible way. But after 46 years, she looked at it and went, "Nah, don't waste your money on the roses. Have a nice cup of tea, and we're going to have a nice breakfast today, which will be make up for the other things this episode." So there you go.
No problems at all. Well, guys, enjoy the hobby, and as always, we'll catch up again in a fortnight's time. 73 is all.
73.